Good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show after a break of, I think, a week or so. I hope everybody is doing fine. We are at the inflection point of an eventful time. In a couple of days, we have the US election, the presidential election, which is going to kind of determine the way the next 4 years in the world will go. So it's a very interesting time we are passing through. So, with that in mind and all the other stuff that's happening, let's have an interesting Q&A session, Ask Abhijit session. I look forward to all your questions. I'm going to take questions only from the live chat today. So let's see who all is there on the live stream. Let's see who all is there. I can see Madhusudan. I can see Slim Shady. Uh, Jenil asks, why don't you need a runway to land a UFO? Rishikesh Das Gupta, Sovik Haldar, Jay Guman, Ralla Avinash, Animish, hello. Siddharth Singh Rajpurohit, Arjun Gupta, Kunal Nagarkoti, Madhusudan, Niharika Gupta, Pranay Paul, Hybrid, Geopolitical Dubey, Satish Mundava, Ram Ram, Advait Nadgauda, Jayate Mihir, Animish, Swapnil Das Tonoy, Shivaji Ithape, Rohan Sharma, Netizen Panduka, Karuna Ratne, Suryansh Suryansh Tiwari, Random Skull, Zubon Ezung, Vinay Esman, Debosman, Dasgupta, Tushar Kalburgi, Manmat Tiwari, Jay Kumar, Mukundan, Kirmil Soresam, Rakshit Mishra, Rudra, Mrigank Bonia, Pamel Nandi, Arjun Gupta, Ankita, Sarth, Achintya Amarant, Kapalin, Ananya Tripathi, Advait Nadgauda, Dungar Singh Chauhan, hello. Okay. Shivaji Rauhan, Swapnil Das Tanoy, and everybody else. Ashish Pandel, Satish Siddhant, Nikhil, Manmat, Akhilesh, El Capitan, Bharat, Vinay Esman, Discombobulation, Priyanshu, Akshay Keswani, Shreyans Jadhav, and everybody else. Okay. Um, let's go. Let's get going with the questions. So, what questions do we have? What questions do we have? Let us see. Lots happening. So, okay, let's go with this one. Let's start with this question. Dhyanendra Singh Yadav says, is there any possibility of Russian invasion of Baltic countries, especially Estonia, after Ukraine? Although Estonia is a NATO member, but Russia has never recognized its sovereignty in etc. Okay, so first of all, those who are not aware, let's find out where is Estonia. The Baltic countries. There are three Baltic countries: Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. So let's go to the map and let us discover where it is. So here we are. Here's the map. Excellent. First question brings us to the map. So we have to go westwards and we will discover the Baltic region very rapidly. Here you have it. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. These are the three countries to the west of Russia. And here we have the Baltic Sea. That's why they call the Baltic countries. And then we have Kaliningrad over here, which is a Russian exclave. So, what is there a possibility of a Russian invasion of the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, after Ukraine? If you were to ask me, I think it would not be a very wise thing to do unless there is no option left for Russia. Because Russia already has its hands full with Ukraine, with the situation that's going on in the Middle East, with Russia's support for Iran, with Russia shoring up the independence of Syria against the Western assault that began roughly 15 years ago, almost 15 years ago, and so on. There's a lot that Russia is involved in. It cannot afford to start multiple wars on multiple fronts. So I don't think there's a possibility right now, at least, of a Russian invasion of the Baltic countries. Whether the Russians recognize the sovereignty or independence of these nations or not is a different matter. But does it make sense for them to start multiple wars on multiple fronts? No, I don't think so. It's not a wise thing to do unless there is no option left for them. Yeah? There are certain situations in which you have no choice but to do it. I don't think the situation is such that Russia has no choice. So I don't think this is going to happen, at least the way things are right now. Vinay Esman raises an important and interesting question. The CM of Mizoram has called for Zoland, Kuki-land, Project K, Kuki-land for Christ indirectly while attending an event in the US. Also, it looks okay. Let's talk about one thing, not two questions in one. So let's talk about the Mizoram CM and his statement. So what's this statement? So I tweeted about this just a few, I don't know, 4 hours ago. Here it is. So where is the tweet? Here it is. This is my Twitter account. So this is the statement the person has done. He's the current CM, the current serving chief minister of what? Mizoram. Now, in case some of you don't know what is Mizoram, where it is, let me. I mean, it's okay. It's not your fault. It's the education system doesn't teach you. So let me show you where Mizoram is located within India. Okay, we zoom into India. You go to the far east region of India. I think most people know today where is Manipur. Yeah, due to unfortunate reasons, but we know where Manipur is. So south of Manipur, you have Mizoram. Okay. So you have a chief minister of Mizoram. I don't remember what his name is. It doesn't matter what his name is. Okay. But there's a new person who's the chief minister. Earlier, there was a different person who, well, he stepped down and a new political party was created and a new chief minister was brought into power. That's what's happened. Okay. So this is where Mizoram lies, south of Manipur. Now, what is the statement this person has made? Let me put that on the screen. Let's bring that on the screen. So this statement, okay, here it is. This is an official website of the government of India. The government of Mizoram is part of the government of India. It comes under the government of India. So this is an official statement on a government website. Speech of whatever to something, Chief Minister Mizoram in Indianapolis, USA, on the 4th of September 2024. Recent statement. Okay, about 2 months ago. Today is the 3rd of November. This is the 4th of September. Slightly less than 2 months ago. So there's a whole speech. I'll not go into it, but let's go and take a look at this paragraph, the penultimate paragraph, and the last two sentences. Here's what this individual says. While a country may have borders, a true nation transcends such limitations. We have been unjustly divided, forced to exist under three different governments in three different countries, and this is something we can never accept. Okay, he makes this statement, and he's talking about the Methodist Church and all, where his brothers and sisters are very well represented. Chin Unity Forum, blah, 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 blah. And he says that his people, the Zo people or the Kuki people or whatever those people are, they are forced to exist under three different governments in three different countries, and this is something they can never accept. This individual, the chief minister of Mizoram, who has taken an oath of allegiance to the country, is saying that he's indirectly saying that he does not recognize the sovereignty and territorial integrity of India. And he seeks an artificial nation, essentially. That's what he is saying. He is advocating the creation, indirectly, he's advocating the creation of an artificial, fictitious nation called Kuki-land or Zoland or Zalengam or whatever the name they want to give it. Now, what is going on here is the question. A serving chief minister who has taken an oath of allegiance to India is expressing separatist sentiments on the soil of a foreign country, the United States, none other than the United States. And this is brazenly put out on an official government website, a separatist agenda. That is how deep the rot runs right now. Now, we have been talking about Manipur, right? How does Mizoram suddenly enter the picture? That's the question. Once again, we go to the map. Or maybe you can take a look at one of my tweets first, okay? It is what it is. So this is the tweet. Manipur is the victim, the sacrificial goat. Mizoram is the real problem. A much bigger problem than the so-called analysts and experts imagine. Mrs. Gandhi knew. That's what I tweeted. Now, what's the deal? To understand the deal, let's look at the map of the region. Yes? So, this is Mizoram. North of Mizoram is Manipur. Mizoram and Manipur share a common border. Yes? Both of these nations, or both of these states, are border states. And to the east of both states, you have Burma, Myanmar. And this is a civil war going on in Myanmar, which is a proxy war between the United States and China. And India essentially has, well, it's kind of doing nothing. It has no real representation in this proxy war. Now, across the border, to the east of the border of India, you have these Kuki people who live there. Now, the Kuki people aren't Burmese. They're fighting Burma. They're fighting the government of Burma. They're fighting the government of India. They're fighting the government of Bangladesh. The Kuki people don't speak the Burmese language. They don't practice Burmese culture. They don't even recognize or respect the country of Burma, even though they live on the territory of Burma. They are not Burmese. They came from somewhere eastwards of Burma, probably in um, the Yunnan region of China, a couple of centuries ago, maybe 2-3 centuries ago. And then they were forcibly, not forcibly, they were settled by the British in various parts of India. So the Kuki people are also known as the Zo people, the Zomi people, the Mizo people, same thing. So the Mizo people of Mizoram are also Kukis. And they are recent arrivals in this region. 200-300 years ago, there were no Mizos or no Kukis in this region. Okay? They are recent immigrants. So the Kukis are essentially entering Mizoram allegedly entering Mizoram in hundreds of thousands, and they are not settling in Mizoram. They are allegedly being transported into Manipur, and they are being settled in Manipur. And that's how thousands of new artificial villages have come up in Manipur, in southern Manipur, in the past few years. Okay? So this is all coordinated. Manipur is the last place in the far east of India where you have Hindus, and that's why Manipur is being victimized. And that's why all these foreigners are being settled in Manipur. And this has been happening for quite some time, but it has taken off in the past few years because of the open border policy that India has had since 1947. So it's not the fault of Narendra Modi and his government, but things could have been, well, a different approach could have been taken earlier, perhaps. But when you have open borders, it takes decades to fence those borders because of the kind of terrain you have over here, extremely hilly and completely forested. It's almost impossible to fence these borders effectively unless you take like 10-15 years to do that. So it's going to be a while until we fence the border. In the meanwhile, these people will keep on coming in. So all these foreign infiltrators are being routed into Manipur, where there's this industrial scale project going on, Project K, to completely re-engineer the demographics of Manipur and to turn the native people of Manipur into minority, which has already happened. That is what's going on. And the Mizos are very much part of the problem. The Mizos were such a big problem that Mrs. Gandhi, the former prime minister, had to take very drastic steps to curb the anti-national separatist tendencies in the region. Look up what happened in 1966. Mrs. Gandhi knew what was happening. So that's the situation. So those tendencies, those separatist anti-national aspirations have never gone away. And we are seeing that at the highest level in the state of Mizoram. Their chief minister, the current serving chief minister, blatantly expressing anti-national separatist sentiments and putting the speech out on an official government website, a speech made on a foreign country. The one country that sponsors and supports all these international activities in India, the US. The US funded and financed Pakistani terrorism in India for decades, and now they are trying to create a new artificial nation, Kuki-land for Christ, on India's eastern flank, out of Indian territory, to cut off India's access to Southeast Asia, because India needs to be completely blocked off, cordoned off. Day before yesterday, the Americans imposed sanctions on multiple Indian companies. The Americans are going all out against India. It's almost like short of an actual war, they're doing everything against India. So that's where we stand today, my dear friends. We as a nation, you should be proud of this. India today is in such, let's go to the map and put this in context. Here's India. India has two major enemies today. Number 2 is China. Number 1 is the US. Facts. If it offends some people who love the West, please go somewhere else. Don't be on this channel. My point is this. India is today in a position that the top two nations in the world, the two most powerful nations in the world, are India's number one and number two enemy. And there are no other nations in the world that are in a position to be India's enemies. India is that powerful. So India, essentially in Asia, is the second most powerful nation, and overall globally, India probably is the fourth most powerful nation. And Russia is a friend of ours. So those who hate Russia can go and cope somewhere. So that is the deal right now. Okay. So it's a great thing. It's something to be proud of, that we are number four, number three in the world, and we have such powerful enemies, and no other nation is even capable of being an enemy. Pakistan doesn't stand a chance against India. Bangladesh doesn't stand a chance against India. No other nation stands a chance against India, militarily or through hard power. Only China and the US. But the bad news is that these two nations, China and the US, are way more powerful than India. But China is facing such heat from the US that we are now seeing the beginnings of an India-China rapprochement. So interesting times we're living in. Interesting times. Well, there we are. Okay. Let's see other questions. Okay, Janvi. Janvi says, "What are my views on Trump's recent tweet on Bangladeshi Hindus?" Let's find that tweet, shall we? Yeah, that's a great question you ask here. So let me find that tweet. Give me a second or two. I think I retweeted that at some point in time. Donald Trump. Where is it? Where is it? Give me a second. Oh, here we are. Let me put that on the screen. So here is the tweet by candidate Trump, former President Trump. Let's read it out, okay? Mr. Trump says, "I strongly condemn the barbaric violence against Hindus, Christians, and other minorities who are getting attacked and looted by mobs in Bangladesh, which remains in a total state of chaos. Barbaric violence. It would never have happened under my watch. Joe and Kamala have ignored Hindus across the world and in America. They've been a disaster from Ukraine to Israel, and blah, 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 blah. We will also protect Hindu Americans and against the anti-religion agenda of the radical left. We will fight for you. We'll fight for your freedom. Under my administration, we will also strengthen our great partnership with India and my good friend, Prime Minister Modi." And then he goes after Kamala Harris. And at the end, he says, "Happy Diwali to all. I hope the Festival of Lights leads to the victory of good over evil." So this is the tweet by President Trump. Now let's break it down. First of all, he says, "I strongly condemn the barbaric violence." Okay, he's calling it barbaric violence, but it's not only against Hindus, he's saying. It's against Hindus, Christians, and other minorities who are getting attacked and looted by mobs in Bangladesh, which remains in a total state of chaos. So he's blaming the situation essentially on Kamala and Joe. And obviously, we know that it's a US induced regime change. The US has been behind this. It's a completely undemocratic, unconstitutional government the Bangladeshis have right now. Sheikh Hasina has never resigned. She was forced to leave by the army at the behest of the US, and the US has done the regime change. So, and after the regime change happened, they have the people of Bangladesh and political parties have been going after Hindus. They've been targeting Hindus. It's a reign of terror against Hindus that the Hindus of Bangladesh are currently experiencing. It's horrible, and no media is covering this in India. Your media, your Indian media is sold out, except for a few media outlets. Most are sold out. That's shameful. So Trump condemns this barbaric violence. He says it would have never happened under his watch. He says that Kamala and Joe, essentially the Democrats, are ignoring Hindus in the world and in America. He's saying that there have been a disaster everywhere. He says that the Republicans will protect Hindu Americans against the left, radical left. Will fight for your freedom. He says that under his administration, India and the US, the relationship will get better. Right, the great partnership with India and my good friend Mr. Modi, and he wishes Happy Diwali. Okay. So the statement that Trump has made, it is a far stronger statement than Vivek Ramaswamy made I think in August. I'll not dig up his tweet now because it will take time to search for it. But Vivek Ramaswamy merely said that it's cause for concern, and then he gave a long explainer as to what the history and what's happening. But he did not strongly condemn it the way Trump has condemned it, and he did not call it barbaric violence. So Vivek Ramaswamy is kind of apologetic about being a brown guy and about being a Hindu. Trump is openly pro-Hindu, but he's also said that it's not just against Hindus, it's also against Christians and other minorities. So my view is that I welcome this tweet. Okay, even Indian politicians haven't made a statement this strong. Prime Minister Modi has expressed concern about what's happening to Hindus in Bangladesh and all, but even he has not said that this is barbaric violence. Even Mr. Modi hasn't said that, but Trump has said it. Obviously, Trump is fighting an election campaign right now. He wants Hindu votes. He wants the votes of Indian origin Americans and all. So obviously, we have to look at it from that perspective. Let us not fool ourselves and think that he loves Hindus and he loves India. Okay, but you will not see Kamala making a tweet like this. Kamala has no love for India or the Hindus, despite being half Indian and half Hindu herself. And at least her mom was born a Hindu, I suppose. I don't know what Kamala was born as. So I would say that, look, if Trump comes to power, India will have about 4 years of respite, to some extent at least. Right now, like I said, we are facing the brunt of the US ire against India. They are trying to create a new nation out of Indian territory in the Far East, Kuki-land for Christ, Project K. They are imposing sanctions on India now. Short of declaring war, they're essentially doing everything while claiming that they are the biggest democracy and they are India's friend. What democracy? India, the US is a joke. I mean, see the kind of electoral BS that's happening in the US right now. Foreigners are able to vote because no ID is required. You call that a democracy? I call it a joke. And despite Trump being the way far more popular candidate, I believe it's highly likely that Kamala will win. Okay? And if Kamala wins, it's going to be a bad time next 4 years, bad time for India and China. Russia is going to be okay. Russia is way too powerful. Russia is like 4 times, 5 times more powerful than China. Okay? No disrespect intended to China or anybody else, but Russia is way more powerful. The only nation that the Americans are really scared of is Russia. But for India and China, it's going to be a bad time if Kamala comes to power. If Trump comes to power, it's still going to be a bad time for China. And he may slightly ease off against India to some extent compared to Kamala. But yeah, so that's how I see Trump's tweet. When it comes to China, India, I think India and China need to revisit their relationship. Enough of this nonsense, Yeah, so there we are. That's how I see this. This is from a Chinese person. Hello. As a Chinese, I often watch your videos on our short video platform Bilibili. Very interesting. Love from China. Well, thank you so much, and greetings and regards from India. Look, we know that India and China and India have not had a good relationship since the 1950s, right? But understand this: before the 1950s, we were the best of friends for 2000 plus years. We never had any problems, India and China. We got along so well. Right? So there is no issue on a people to people, culture to culture, civilization to civilization front. But since the 1950s, the two governments have had lots of problems because India and China were never neighbors. We never had a shared border. But then this happened: the annexation of Tibet, and then India and China suddenly become nations with an undemarcated border. And there's a war in '62, and then the Chinese government, because China is a much stronger nation than India, refuses to demarcate the border to keep India under pressure. Well, that's what stronger countries do. We have to accept the fact that India is a weaker country than China today. We may be the older civilization, so on and so forth. Past history means nothing today. As of today, China is about roughly 3 to 4 times more powerful than India. And that is a fact that we have to deal with. So I would like to see better relations between India and China. I'm a strong advocate of a better relationship between India and China. People to people, culture to culture, we have no issues. Our cultures are very compatible and quite similar in a lot of ways. I'll not go into the details. The governments need to sit together and find solutions to the problems that have plagued us for the past 70 odd years. So thank you for your comment. And I certainly hope and wish for a better relationship going forward between our two civilizations. And I'll do what I can from my perspective to make the relationship better. All right. Mahi Shrestha says, is infinity between 2 and 3 and the infinity of natural numbers same? Look, you know what? There are bigger and smaller infinities. It's an interesting question you ask. The number line. You know the number line? You draw a line, you put numbers on it, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on the other side, -1, -2, -3. Between 0 and 1, there's an infinite number of numbers. Between 0 and 0.1, there's an infinite number of numbers. But the infinite number of numbers or points between 0 and 0.1 is smaller than the number of points between 0 and 1. So even infinities can have different sizes. But you can't really quantify the size or magnitude of an infinity. But it's clear that the number of points on the number line between 0 and 1 is greater than the number of points between 0 and 0.1. And yet both are infinite. So it's weird. You can't really compare infinities. But it's an interesting point you raise. It's really interesting. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing. The first time you realize this as a kid, what the hell did I just realize? That's what you feel the first time you realize it. Okay. Let's see some other interesting questions. Geopolitical dubases. Do you think China will set a border demarcation with India? If China does so, will it be considered to be Xi's defeat in China? Look, when a stronger nation makes concessions to a weaker nations, it is going to be regarded as kind of well, the citizens of the nation will not see it very positively. When two nations negotiate, the stronger nation should get more out of the deal than the weaker nation. That's just simply how it goes. So if China and India, look, China has steadfastly refused to demarcate the border between India and Tibet, the India-Tibet border, since the 1950s, since the 1960s. We've had, I don't know how many rounds of talks, 20, 30, I don't know, 87, I don't know what number it is. Every time there's a bunch of round of talks and nothing ever happens. No concrete result ever comes. So, and both nations have pretty hardline positions. I think a reasonable solution is to freeze the border where it stands. So India, what does it mean? It means India gives up its claim on Aksai Chin and China gives up its claim on Arunachal Pradesh. If India gives up its claim on Aksai Chin, whoever is the prime minister is going to lose the next election. You see? That's what will happen. So can an Indian prime minister take such a decision? No. That's what happens when you have a democracy. Right? Is it in the national interest to demarcate the border as soon as possible? It is. But then you will end up losing the election. So then you can't demarcate the border. When it comes to the Chinese position, they claim Arunachal Pradesh. And they are in possession of Aksai Chin. And possession is 9/10 the law. Now, if Xi Jinping, President Xi, were to give up the claim on on Arunachal Pradesh, I would imagine that the Chinese public will see it as a very large concession and kind of a defeat. So it's difficult even for him to give up the claim on Arunachal Pradesh because otherwise he will end up looking weak. And it is not a wise thing for a Chinese leader to look weak. It's very difficult. Public sentiment is very dangerous. And even in a non-democratic nation like China, the government and the leadership has to really be careful about what the public sentiment is. So I think it's going to be difficult for the two nations to reach some kind of agreement. It's going to be difficult. You know, if both nations were dictatorships and public sentiment did not matter, then the straightforward solution is to simply freeze the border wherever it lies. Yeah, there are some differing perceptions and all. You get people together and you mark it down kilometer per kilometer. Let it take 5 years or whatever. Do it. It can be done. But these intractable issues like Aksai Chin, Arunachal Pradesh, etc., are going to possibly be a deal breaker. So even if both the governments have the best of intentions, it's going to be really hard for this to be done. You see, that's the way things stand right now. I would like the border to be demarcated. I'm sure the Chinese also at this point in time, given the overall geopolitical climate, would like to, normalize the relationship with India as far as possible. It's going to take time. It's going to be a step-by-step process. I think the border demarcation, even though it's extremely desirable, is something that will take a lot of time if it whenever it happens. So it's going to be difficult, really difficult to arrive at. Okay. Chess. Nikhil Kumar says, who according to you is the greatest chess player of all time? Magnus Carlsen, Gary Kasparov, Bobby Fischer, somebody else? Kasparov is one of the greats, one of the all-time greats for sure. Anatoly Karpov was great, and he was dethroned by Kasparov. Bobby Fischer was probably the most genius level, one of the most genius grandmasters of all time, but his reign was not that long. I think Kasparov had a very long reign as world champion. Magnus Carlsen also has had a very long reign as world champion. And I've not followed chess for quite some time. After the advent of AI and computers and all, when computers started beating humans and all that, I kind of lost interest in chess. And I used to play chess as a kid, but I gave up playing chess at, I think, sometime in my early teens, because you start a chess game, it's going to take a couple of hours, and there comes a point in time in your life where you have to decide that those 2 hours that I'm spending, or 3 hours I'm spending on a game of chess, it's a waste of time, because that's not my overall objective in life, to be a chess player. So I gave up chess, and I kind of lost touch with chess around there. But coming back to the question, look, I may be wrong, I may have certain biases, but during the time I used to follow chess, I think it was Kasparov who was the strongest chess player. So I can't really say who's the best chess player. From what I've seen, it's Kasparov, but I'm sure Fischer probably may have been a better player. There are many other great players, both Winnick and I don't know, so many. Yeah, and right now we have a very interesting crop of young players, really young players. Ling Dhiren, Gukesh, Vidit Gujarati, those two siblings, the Indian siblings. I forget the names, I'm sorry, but yeah, Vaishali and her brother. We have a whole lot of really interesting, exciting young players who've come up. So it's good to see that. So I'm not sure I know who's the best player. If you ask me about boxing, I may be wrong, but from what I've seen, Mike Tyson is the best of all, or greatest of all time. Some people would disagree. They'll say Muhammad Ali is the greatest of all time. And some people would say even that is wrong. There's a Roman player whose name we don't know, but whose statue is available, who may be the best player of all time. But from what I have seen, I'll give you my perspective. So probably Kasparov from my perspective, or maybe Fischer, maybe. Yeah. Ashutosh Tiwari says, what's your opinion on the 114 fighter jets deal? So there's this tender that India has been giving out for the past 78 years or something. We want 114 fighter planes. Yeah. Definitely not 78 years, but at least roughly a quarter century. And there's been no progress. And because of US arm twisting, it looks like India may now open up the tender again and probably and perhaps purchase American fighter planes, which is a very, very bad move. You purchase American equipment, you are susceptible to all kinds of blackmail. Ask the Australians. The Australians are a very close US ally, and they bought what, the F-15 or something, F-15 or whichever F-15A or something they bought in the 1980s, and they discovered that when they took the planes out for the sorties and testing and all, they could not have the locking mechanism lock onto targets that they wanted. The locking mechanism would only lock onto targets that were authorized by the Americans. The Australians could not select targets they wanted. And when they spoke to the Americans about this, the Americans said, deal with it. That's how it's going to be. And then apparently the Australians took about 20 years to hack and crack that code and install their own code to finally unlock the full potential of these fighter planes. So you buy American equipment, it's going to have what's called kill switches. Kill switch. They can remotely disable the thing. So when Balakot happened and the Pakistanis sent F-16s to counter the Indian Air Force, the Americans could have disabled the F-16s, but they did not. But if India acquires whatever American hardware, F-15, F-16, whatever, The Americans will be able to disable it on demand at will. Do you want such aircraft? Do we really want that? And when it comes to spare parts, they can deny spare parts whenever they want. Our Tejas program is right now stuck because the Americans are not delivering the jet engines as per the contract timelines and all that. Right? They have breached the contract, and we are able to do not a thing about it. And they now, yesterday or day before, they imposed sanctions on a bunch of Indian companies, the Americans. Do you think it makes sense to buy military hardware from a nation that's your primary adversary? Makes no sense. So I don't. I hope the Indian government does not purchase Western fighter planes or American fighter planes. Maybe the Rafale is okay. We already have 36. Buy a bunch more. Buy 114. If you need 114, buy Rafales. We already know how to operate those. And the French are much friendlier and much better, much more amenable to cooperating with India compared to the US. Look, I am not anti-US. The US is anti-India. Okay, there's a whole bunch of people who like to portray me as being anti-West, anti-India. Look, I have lived in the West. I know people there. I have friends there. Wonderful place. They are anti-India. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not anti-West. I want to be friends with everybody. But it's they who play this game. So I would say, look, if you want fighter planes, buy it from the French. If you want to buy it from a Western country, or buy it from Russia. Yes, Russia also has good fighter planes. So buy from Russia if the West is not playing ball. There we have it. Okay, let us see some other questions. Okay. um, The Great Revolution says, any advice for a normal person who wants to help the country by becoming the prime minister? How to be influential and come in power and to actually do good? Well, first of all, sir, sir, ma'am, whoever you are, let me say that a normal person cannot become the prime minister. Not possible. You have to be extraordinary and exceptional to become a prime minister. Becoming a prime minister is incredibly difficult, and you need to be a person of extraordinary capabilities and talents in multiple spheres of competence to be prime minister. You need to learn the art of politics, the art of making deals, the art of dealing with enemies, the art of making compromises, the art of handling people, the art of numerical calculation in your mind, electoral calculation, electoral analysis, how to deal with coalitions, how to deal with enemies you need on your side, how to deal with business people, how to deal with corruption, how to deal with a whole bunch of people from a whole different set of domains, armed forces people, business people, diplomats, spies, all kinds of stuff. It is incredibly difficult. An ordinary person simply cannot even imagine how difficult it is to be prime minister. Of course, we have had prime ministers who were not competent enough to do that, and then that's why we are in the situation we are right now. But to be a good prime minister or a great prime minister is no mean feat. It's no mean task. Okay. Now, how to become influence, and how to come to power to actually do good. Look, influence and power are very different things. Very different things. Influence means people listen to you. It means you have outreach. It means that you have some relevance in some part of the world. That's called influence. It's like having, let's say, 100,000 followers on Twitter or 1 million followers on Twitter. That's influence. So your 1 million followers will listen to you. But if you if you order them to do something, will they obey your orders? No. So you have influence, you don't have power. Power means they will obey you without question. Um, so how to become influential? How to come to first to be influential? You have to be relevant. You have to be relevant in some way or the other in politics, in whatever field. But how to come to power? You have to be in politics. You have to be in a political party, or you have to create your own political party, which is more difficult. And to have people who will follow you and obey you, and you have to scale that. That's how you become powerful. Power is nothing but leveraging other people by controlling them, by having them obey you. And to actually be good means you need to have the right set of the right moral framework, which is even more difficult because in politics you have to make compromises a lot. So how to remain moral and how to remain uh, how to stick to your principles despite having to make compromises. That's an incredibly difficult tightrope to walk. Not easy. Not easy at all. Look, if people could do it, they would all become prime minister. Very few can do it, right? So what's my advice? If you really want to be prime minister someday, you have to get involved in active politics at the earliest, and then you start coming to terms with the realities of politics, right? And as a leader, you need to have a certain set of attributes. You need to be a really good speaker, orator, a leader. Like, take a look at the most obvious person, Mr. Modi. He gives a speech. Every individual who's listening feels that he's being spoken to one, right? So you have to learn the art of captivating an audience. You need to be charismatic. You need to be a really good orator, and of course, you need to uh, put your money where your mouth is. You have to match your talk with action, and so on. You have to deliver results. Very difficult. Okay, so that's what I can say. But my advice is, if you really want to be prime minister someday, you have to enter politics immediately. Whichever is your favorite political party, I will not give any recommendations. It's for you to choose. Okay. McLevin says India has made a strong statement in the United Nations and call on the US to remove sanctions on Cuba. Is that why the US sanctioned some Indian companies? No, it's not why the US sanctioned Indian companies. It's why the US, look, India has called on the US to remove sanctions on Cuba. That's no big deal. The Americans have sanctioned India because they want to squeeze India slowly, gradually, increase the pressure they are applying on India. What the Americans want in India is regime change. Mr. Modi is a problem. He's a thorn in their flesh. That's why they are trying so much in so many different ways to make him look weak and ineffective. The Canada angle. They're accusing the Indian government of running criminal rings and planning assassinations on Canadian soil. Right? That's what they allege. Even though it's the Canadians who are harboring terrorists. Canadian citizens who are terrorists, right? The artificial Khalistan movement is being harbored by the Canadians, the Americans and their various vassals, various minions, Canada, the UK, Australia, all that, right? These countries have no option but to do whatever the Americans tell them. So there's the entire Canada situation, which is like devolving every day, which is getting worse every day. The relationship between India and Canada. They have even been spying, surveilling Indian diplomats in contravention of the Vienna Convention, the Canadians. So there is that. The Americans are also alleging that India tried to bump off some American terrorist, Panun or whatever, right? There is that. There is the entire Khalistan thing that is going on in various parts of the world, all the Anglosphere nations. Then there is the fact that India has refused to condemn the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. India has refused to go along with Western sanctions. So, and India has been buying large quantities of Russian oil and re-exporting that to Europe, etc., and so on. So that's why the Americans have imposed sanctions on Indian companies, because apparently certain Indian companies are exporting some spare parts or whatever to the Russians. The Americans have been supporting Pakistan for decades, selling it arms, ammunition, F-16s, whatever the Pakistanis needed, right? For decades. The Americans have funded and financed Pakistani terrorism against India for decades, which is perfectly fine. But if India sells spare parts to some Russian companies, we are evil. I mean, what sort of a joke is this? See, the Americans are outright hypocrites, but they have earned the right to be hypocrites. Only the powerful can indulge in hypocrisy. The weak can't. So that's where we stand. The American sanctions against India are not because of some statement we made in the United Nations. It's just that they want regime change in India. They want a much weaker government in India. They want a pliable government in India. The long-term best case scenario for the US is the balkanization of India. Remember the balkanization of the USSR in the 1990s? The USSR was a much larger nation. And all the Central Asian republics and the Baltic nations, etc., all declared independence and broke off. And Russia was penetrated, infiltrated. There was a pro-US President Yeltsin in power who essentially sold off the Russian economy and bankrupted the whole nation. The Americans would like the same thing to happen in India. So the ideal scenario for the US is India and China go to war and blow each other to bits. And then the Americans can then fully focus on Russia. That's the ideal scenario. Or India and China go to war, and India is blown to bits and China is greatly diminished. And again, then the Americans can focus only on Russia. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen now. So they would like to squeeze India and squeeze China at the same time. In an ideal situation, the coalition government breaks up. There's a regime change. Different political dispensation comes to power in Delhi, and then they do whatever Washington tells them. And India is bankrupted, just like the USSR was bankrupted, and so on. That's the thing. So that is the end game. So even the Chinese, I'll tell you, look, from their perspective, they also don't want any strong nation in Asia apart from China. So from a Chinese perspective also, the ideal end state is the balkanization of India. But there is a difference between the American perspective and the Chinese perspective. The Americans will not be content with simply the balkanization of India. They also want the complete eradication of Indian culture and civilization. They want the complete industrial scale mass conversion of India, of the population of India, to various foreign religions, one of two Abrahamic religions. The Chinese have no such agenda. The Chinese have no issue with Indian culture and civilization. They simply don't want India to be a powerful potential competitor. So which one would you prefer? Yeah, that's the kind of choices we are faced with today. Okay, what else? Geopolitical Dubey says, now that Iran is the 10th nuclear power state, but do they have vehicles to launch, or are they able to launch ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles? Why does Geopolitical Dubey make such a statement that Iran is the 10th nuclear power? Why is he or she making this statement? Let me tell you why this statement is being made. Once again, we'll go to my Twitter account. And with what do we have? Yeah, look at this tweet. So once again, about 12 hours ago, a report came out that there was a 4.7 magnitude earthquake in Iran's Semnan province. There was an earthquake in the same region a couple of weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. And once again, we've had this earthquake in Semnan. It's always magnitude 4 point something on the Richter scale. So I tweeted that Iran has conducted another earthquake in Semnan province. And a few days before that, I think the Iranians, what statement did the Iranians make? Yeah, here we are. This was November 1. So Mr. Kamal Kharazi, the head of foreign relations of Iran, said that Iran has now acquired the technical capabilities to produce nuclear weapons, and we may in the future increase the range of our missiles beyond 2,000 kilometers. So what does it mean? It means that Iran is essentially the 10th nuclear weapons power. They've been trying to enrich uranium hexafluoride in various plants to produce weapons grade uranium for many years now, a couple of decades at least. By now, I can assure you they will have sufficient fissile material, uranium, enriched weapons grade uranium, to have to build a handful of nuclear warheads, maybe 10-20 warheads for sure by now. And they have extremely good ballistic and cruise missiles. The range of their missiles would be roughly 2,000 kilometers, give or take. They can definitely strike at Israel, which is about 1,000-1,500 kilometers away, depending on which part of Israel you are talking about. So they have excellent missile systems, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. They have hypersonic cruise missiles. And if you see the hypersonic cruise missile strikes, you can see that there are last-minute adjustments at hypersonic speeds. So these are maneuverable hypersonic missiles. So there's no question about their ability to deliver the package. Now the question is about ICBM. So when you're talking about a missile with a range of about 1,500 kilometers, we're talking about tactical missiles, which is like more or less short range missiles. When you talk about medium range missiles, or intermediate range missiles, you're talking about a range of about 5,000 or so kilometers. And if it's a missile with a range of more than 5,000 kilometers, probably more than, it depends on who you ask. For me, an ICBM is a missile with a range of more than 8,000 kilometers, like the Agni 5 or whatever. So I'm sure the Iranians can develop it over time. And obviously, it will take some time for them to develop it, but they will be, they certainly have the capability, the technical and engineering capability to be able to eventually build ICBMs. The North Koreans have ICBMs. They can reach the continental United States anytime they want, if they want to. So even the Iranians can do it. So how many nations have ICBMs? India has, the US has it, the Russians have it, the French have it. The UK doesn't have it anymore. They used to have missiles, but now their warheads are mated to American missiles. So let's cut the UK out. And then you have China and India, which have ICBMs, and North Korea. Iran's number one adversary right now, regionally at least, is Israel, and they have the capability to target Israel. Their overall great enemy is the Shaitan-e-Bozorg, like they call the US. To reach the US is a whole different matter. Right now, I'm sure Iran doesn't have the capabilities, but eventually they may be able to develop it well, depending on various factors. Yash Singh says, I work in the oil and gas industry. I want to ask, how can I innovate something new in my industry with the help of AI and machine learning? The oil and the gas industry. So, when it comes to oil and gas, the industry, there's a whole different set of things you do. One of the things you do is prospecting. Prospecting means you try and figure out where you can find new deposits of oil and gas, typically offshore. So, for example, one of the things that kind of I find perplexing is, look, let's take a look at the map. Where's the map? Here's the map. So we know that there's a tremendous amount of oil and gas, oil, etc., petroleum deposits in Saudi Arabia, yeah, in Kuwait, in Iraq, in Iran, in the Persian Gulf, Oman, the UAE, etc. Right? And when it comes to these regions, they're not far from India. So, and we also know that there's some deposits at what, Bombay High they call it, or somewhere off the coast of Western India near the city of Mumbai. I wonder why we have never really tried to prospect for oil and gas off the coastline of India. I am pretty sure if we look seriously and if we look extensively, we may be able to end up discovering more deposits than you have in the West Asia region. But we haven't done that. We know that there have been some deposits discovered in the past in Assam, but it looks like we haven't even tried. So one of the things you can do in the oil and gas industry is to kind of try and figure out how to discover new deposits based on existing geological, etc., data, gravity maps, or whatever geological things you have, data you have. That's one thing you could do. So prospecting is one thing. What else could you do? I suppose I can think of prospecting, but I'm sure as somebody who's a professional in the industry, you can think of lots of ways of innovating in the industry using AI and machine learning. So one example I can give you is prospecting. One thing you do in astronomy today, okay? We have data, astronomical data that goes back at least a century now. Old star maps and images and all that. Tremendous amount of data is there and stored, digitized and all that. But the data is so voluminous and copious that it's very hard for humans to go through all of that. So what you can do, so what astronomers are doing these days is using AI and machine learning to sort through all this ancient data, the past 100 years, various images of stars and all that, and try and find anomalies. And they have found anomalies. There are stars that have disappeared, just winked off for some reason. So you can find a lot of anomalies just like that by feeding this data into an AI system, into a neural network or whatever, which is designed to parse through this. So you could do something similar for the sake of for the purpose of prospecting by feeding that sort of data into an AI system, customized AI system. That's one thing I can think of. I'm sure you can think of more. Okay. Okay, once again, we're talking about now Project K, Kuki-land. Lalit Pawar says, what is my take on Zogam? After the regime change in Bangladesh, is there any possibility of something cooking about Zogam? How will Kamala or Trump becoming president affect it? So once again, with reference to Bangladesh. So we discussed this just a while ago. Project K, Kuki-land, the American project to create an artificial nation out of parts of India, Bangladesh, and Burma. The Indian states of Manipur and Mizoram, and Bangladesh and Burma. So the objective of this artificial nation is to cut off India's access to Eastern Asia completely, just like Pakistan cuts off India's access to West Asia as well as Eurasia and Central Asia. We simply can't go anywhere because Pakistan blocks us, right? Similarly, you have Bangladesh, which is East Pakistan, and you're going to have this new artificial cookie land for Christ, which will do all that. So the objective is to completely encircle India. So that is Zogam, Kuki-land, Project K, Zalengam, whatever name you want to give to this fictitious fake nation that will never emerge. Now, the regime change in Bangladesh will kind of complicate matters, because while Sheikh Hasina was in power, she ensured that she completely neutralized all anti-India elements who were earlier operating in Bangladesh. She cracked down hard on them and ensured that there was peace in the region. No anti-India activities were allowed to be carried out from Bangladeshi soil. Now that you have a very different regime, an unconstitutional, undemocratic coup regime in Bangladesh under this guy, the US puppet Mohammed Yunus. It's a very strongly anti-India government. They are already targeting Hindus in various pogroms, and I can assure you that they will reignite all those anti-India activities that used to happen before Sheikh Hasina came to power in Bangladesh, in East Pakistan. So these anti-India activities will essentially be about pushing terrorists across the border into Tripura, Mizoram, with the objective of destabilizing the region. Even Meghalaya, you will see more infiltration happening into various other parts of India, West Bengal, Assam, and all that. All of these activities will now be taken up on priority by this new unconstitutional, undemocratic government of East Pakistan. So that will also obviously include support for this fake artificial nation of Kuki-land, Zogam, Zalengam, whatever. If Kamala comes to power, that project is going to take extremely high priority for the US. And it's going to be a big challenge for India. If Trump comes to power, he may not be willing to prioritize that. He may try to even shut the project down, possibly. And then there'll be a tussle or tug of war between Trump and the deep state, the US military industrial State Department establishment. So if Trump comes to power, India may have some kind of respite for some time, maybe 4 years. If Kamala comes to power, it's going to be very challenging for India. So for India, it's better if Trump comes to power. But that may not be very likely. Who knows? I hope I'm wrong. Okay. Swapnil Das Tonoy says, I'm 24, but for some reason, I have lost the motive of life. I'm getting depressed. Can I restart my educational career at this stage? Right now, I'm doing a Bachelor of in Mathematics in the 3rd year. Look, at the age of 24, it's like you're still in the beginning of life. Lots of options are open to you at the age of 24, which will not be open to you at the age of 34. So, and you are doing a bachelor in mathematics. So, I don't know the circumstances or the reasons that have led to you currently at this stage feeling a loss of motivation and being depressed. Depression, essentially, what does it mean? What does it mean to be depressed? I have never been depressed in my life, but I'm telling you what it means to be depressed. It means that you have lost hope for some time. That it means that right now you feel that there is a lack of hope for the future. That's kind of what depression is, and that's why depression is kind of dangerous. Uh, and you kind of don't see what is the way forward and what your goals are and what you're going to do in life. That's kind of it's a feeling of being lost and not seeing too much hope for the future. That is depression. That's how I interpret this word depression. I'm not sure if everybody sees it the same way, but my point is, at the age of 24 there are so many options open to you. Even if you don't have a degree, you can do so much in life. So you certainly can achieve a lot of things in life. Restart your educational career. You can get your degree in mathematics, your bachelor's degree. In India, how long does it take to get a bachelor's degree? 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is. Get your degree and then see what you can do in life. With a bachelor's degree in mathematics, you can get a good job in various things. I'm sure in IT, you can get a reasonably good job in stock market trading. You can become a trader. You can become a business person. There's so much you can do. But you have to take chances, you have to take risks, you have to move yourself to a place where there are more opportunities. I'm not sure where you're located. If you feel that whatever town or city you're in doesn't offer you opportunities, you may have to take a risk and move somewhere else, perhaps, maybe to a different part of the country, maybe to a different country. Um, Look, I cannot give you a specific solution in life. My point is that at the age of 24, there's a tremendous amount of things you can do in life. A lot of options are open to you. Life is long. You have so many decades ahead of you. So don't be depressed. There's a lot you can do. So that's what I can tell you. Some people feel that, I have not achieved anything. My friends have done this. My friends have done that. So and my so and so friend has a job that gives them so and so, I don't know, the package of these many lakhs a year, and I'm still doing a degree. Yeah, it you can feel that way. I mean, it's easy to feel that way. My point is, don't compare yourself to people like this. Don't compare yourself to others. Do what you can. Do the best you can. You're just starting off. Create a big goal for yourself of some kind and work towards that. So that's what I can say. Don't feel demotivated. Your whole life is open in front of you. So many options you have that a person at the age of 34 won't have. So be positive, be enthusiastic, and I'm sure you will do well. All the best, sir. Okay. Harsh Rathi says, do you think India lacked an exceptional military general in the past 1,000 years? Like Scandagupta, Subothai, Hannibal, Napoleon. If we would have had that, would India have been liberated way before we were liberated? The Maratha Empire was liberated India, wasn't it? We had so many exceptional generals under the Maratha Empire. It was infighting that led to the defeat of the Marathas to the barbaric foreigners, the Europeans, the British. The Maratha Empire had liberated India in the 18th century already. And we lost that. The British did not defeat the Mughals. The British defeated the Hindvi Swarajya of the Maratha Empire. And we had many exceptional generals. It's not enough to have exceptional generals. You need to have exceptional kings. Generals, they come under kings. Your military victories can be squandered away by the political leadership on the negotiating table. It happens. So you need exceptional military capabilities, military leadership, and political leadership, which is kings, emperors, or whatever, prime ministers. Military plus political. That's what you need. That combination is what you need. We've had in the past 1,000 years many exceptional military leaders. Uh, if you go back 1,000 years, you had Rajendra Chola. What did he do? Yeah, he conquered Southeast Asia. The Chola Empire had vassals all the way to the Philippines. Then you had the Marathas. I mean, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was a great warrior himself, military leader. And then you had various other military leaders that were part of the Maratha Empire who were also exceptional. So, um, yeah, so, and India was liberated by the Marathas. Right. Um, Hardik says, is it possible to restore the old Vedic Gurukul system today? No. Why do I say no? During the Vedic age, what was India's population? The Vedic age, do we understand what the Vedic age was? It's a period of time that's several thousand years ago. The time period when Lord Krishna lived on the planet may have been roughly, I don't know, maybe 5,000-6,000 years ago. Okay, Dwarka, which Lord Krishna ruled, was archaeologically a Harappan or Sindhu Saraswati era city. And that was a completely urban phase of our history, the Saraswati Sindhu era. The Vedic era was much before the Saraswati Sindhu era. The Vedic era was completely pastoral, rural India. No cities, or just a handful of towns that were at that time called cities. And India's population was very low. And most of India was engaged in agriculture. It was not an urban civilization. At that point in time, we were not an urban civilization. We were a rural, agricultural, pastoral civilization. And the unit of currency was cattle, cows. Why are cows so revered? Because they were currency. The man who had the most cows was the wealthiest. You just have 2 cows, you're poor. That's how it used to be. That was the Vedic era. Very small population centers, very small population density. At that time, you had the Gurukul system. So one guru and maybe 4-5 students. One guru, 4-5 students. Today, you have 1.4 billion Indians. Where do you find those many gurus? Your teachers aren't gurus. Your teachers are service providers who have no knowledge. The average teacher is hollow. They only regurgitate what's written in those ridiculous textbooks, much of which is distorted. They can't think for themselves. And the moment you can't pay them next month's fees, they will throw you out. You call that a guru? So in today's era, it's almost impossible to recreate the circumstances and the conditions that are necessary for a Vedic style Gurukul system. Very difficult. We can try and learn something from that era and the kind of values we had and try and incorporate them in a reformed education system. But if you ask me, it's going to be very difficult to revive and restore the old Vedic Gurukul system. The Gurukul system, you had kids who would go and live for a few years with the guru, right? You think you can trust today's gurus to send your kids and live with them today? I don't think so. The moral standards of society have declined very much today. The amount of trust in society has declined very badly today. India is no longer a high trust society. People are scared to let their kids out for 2 hours without supervision on the streets, on the road, in garden, wherever. Dangerous. So this is a very different India today. It's not the society which we had several thousand years ago. And because of that, I think it's almost impossible to restore the old Gurukul system. There are people who try to create something like Gurukuls and all, and some of them are able to do something to a certain level. But yeah, it's difficult. That's my perspective. Bajirao was literally undefeated. That's correct. You see, we had great generals. Okay, Krishnadevaraya was another. Right, I agree. Okay, Ayush Pandey says, does Russia take their population decline to be a threat? I watched a video of the Armenia Azerbaijan war in which the Russian made robots were used. Please tell more. Um, okay, that's two very different questions. Let's take the question of the population decline in Russia. I'm not sure what the total fertility rate in Russia is, but it must be definitely significantly below 2.1. 2.1 children per female is the replacement rate. If a nation has a total fertility rate of 2.1 children per woman, then the population remains the same. It doesn't grow, it doesn't decrease, it remains more or less the same. So that's replacement level TFR 2.1. In India, our TFR is now 2.0. We are below replacement. Our population is going to start declining, which means over time, our average age, median age will start increasing. In China, the TFR is what, 1.1 or something? China is the TFR has reached crisis levels, catastrophic levels, and there's no going back from it. China is going to witness a demographic disaster in a few decades. Japan also, the TFR is extremely low, 1.2 or something. Once again, very bad for society because the population is going to start aging very rapidly and declining. Russia, I think, what's the TFR? Let's try and ask our good friend Google, shall we? So if you go to Google and Russia TFR, you search for that. TFR. What's the TFR right now? It's 1.826, which is not terribly bad. I was imagining it'll be like 1.5 or something. And it's an increase of 0.05% from 2023. In 23, the fertility rate TFR was 1.825. Now it's 1.826. So overall, the TFR seems to be slowly, gradually increasing in Russia. Let's see the macro trends thing. What do we have? So you look here from the 1960s onwards. What's the blue line? What's the thing? Okay, it's giving you all kinds of data. Is it about Russia? It's about Russia fertility rate. And okay, annual percentage change births per woman. Let's take a look at the blue graph. So it was so since the 2020s, it's around 1.8 something. Around 2000, it was 1.2, which is bad. In 1988, it was 2.1, which was replacement level. And the 50s, it was 2.8, and so on. So right now it's 1.8 something, and slowly, gradually, there's some small change. So overall, it is not as alarming as you would imagine. But yes, I think the country should take it very seriously. Population decline is a danger. It is a threat. And some people will argue that decreasing population is good because it lightens the burden on the planet. I take your point, but understand this. When a country's total fertility rate declines drastically, the birth rate plummets. As a consequence, the median age of the population starts increasing. So if let's take a look at China, for example. Let's shall we look? Yeah, let's take a look at the Chinese TFR to put things in perspective. Okay. So we had Russia TFR. Let's look for China TFR. What is the Chinese TFR? 1.7 in 22. Not sure about that. It was. So if you look at this, okay, verification, etc. Look, if you look at the Chinese TFR, birth rate is less than death rate. It's becoming irreversible. Statista. Let's see what Statista has to say. Yeah, it's 1.16, 1.18. It's terrible in China. So what this does, what does it mean? It means that the Chinese population is gonna is gonna start shrinking because the birth rate is less than the death rate. So the Chinese population starts shrinking. There are fewer children being born, and the average age of the population starts increasing. So by 2050, if your average age in China is 60 years, it means the average person anywhere in China is 60 years old. So where are you going to get the energy from, the vigor from, the vitality from? How are you going to send soldiers to the armed forces. You're going to have a smaller and smaller pool of young men or women who can join the armed forces. It's bad, isn't it? So, so it's dangerous to have a very rapidly decreasing TFR. In a nation like India, with a population of 1.4 billion, our ideal population in the subcontinent should be around 300 million. So some people will argue that let's decrease the population very drastically, very fast, have a one-child policy, but then you'll end up like China. For a nation like India, if our ideal population is 300 million and we are at 1.4 billion, we should give ourselves 100 years or 200 years to reach 300 million, not 50 years. That is disaster. So you have to understand math and all that to be able to appreciate these arguments, but it is a dangerous thing. So I'm sure the Russians are taking this very seriously. The Russian government is a very serious government. Mr. Putin is a genuine nationalist and patriot. If Mr. Putin gets his succession right eventually, I think if he gets that right, and he ensures the right leader comes to power after him, then I think in a century, Mr. Putin will be known as Putin the Great. He is genuinely that great. I thought. Yeah. Okay. Paresham Tiwari says, do you think fascist regime will return to Europe and illegal migration to Europe is fueling this? Illegal migration in Europe is a huge problem, and the EU is fueling this. See, every member of the EU. So, what is the EU? The European Union, right? It's a coalition of nations. It's a supranational organization. And what an organization like the EU does is that it has pooled sovereignty. What does it mean? It means that every nation that wants to become part of the EU has to reform its system in a variety of ways. And once you become a member of the EU, you lose some of your national sovereignty and you give it away. And in return, you get some benefits in exchange. What benefits do you get? Your people, your population can travel across the EU without visa. And your population can work anywhere in the EU without any special permits or anything. So your people, the individuals, get some benefits. But as a nation, you give up some of your sovereignty. It's like a deal with the devil. So when you give up some of this sovereignty, it means that these unelected people who work out of Brussels, the EU leadership, they will decide what policies will be implemented in your nation, even though they have not been elected by your people. And then they will assign immigration quotas and refugee quotas for every country, and you are forced to accept that. And if you don't accept it, then they impose a fine of several $1 million per day, which in the long run can bankrupt your nation. So when you have such a situation, what can you do? Well, you can do what the British did, Brexit. They exited the EU. But even then, they have this migration that's happening. Britain is now soon going to become a very different kind of nation demographically. So despite exiting the EU, they still have their own idiotic policies, in the UK. Now, in the EU, the EU leadership from Brussels is implementing these policies, which is causing this demographic disaster in Europe. In European nations, they are forcing these nations to accept refugees, illegal infiltrators who are being funneled in on an industrial scale. And only low quality, low skill people from certain parts of the world are being allowed. They don't want high skilled people with great degrees and all that. No. They want people with no skills. And they want people from certain countries which have cultures that are very strongly incompatible with European values and culture. It's demographically re-engineering and breaking Europe. That's what Brussels is doing. That's what the EU is doing deliberately. So what can be the response? The response, we are seeing that people are really, really disaffected by this. People are really angry in various European countries. They're trying to push back, but the police come in the way. They allow the illegal infiltrators to do whatever they want. violence and public disorder and all that, but they don't allow the natives to fight back. Well, what on earth is going on, right? So that is going to give rise to racism, fascist sentiments, and all that, and people revisiting their perceptions of Mussolini and Hitler. That's going to happen when the entire state government machinery, EU machinery, is going to work against the native people of Europe. But I don't think fascist regimes will return to Europe simply because the EU won't allow this to happen. I don't think there's any real democracy anywhere in the world. I think any election can be rigged. I mean, recently there were elections in France, and what happened? Monsieur Macron, they don't even allow that government to come to power. So in France, in a nation like France, the president has almost unlimited powers. And Monsieur Macron has kind of exercised those, yeah. So I think throughout Europe, the left will stay in power, except for a couple of countries like Hungary and Poland to some extent, who are kind of trying to resist what the EU says. But how long will they ward this off? So I don't think fascist regimes will return to Europe. You may have soft fascist or soft right regimes in Europe, like Madame Meloni, who's kind of right wing, but I think she's more of a centrist than hard right. So in the long run, I think Europe is headed for disaster, demographic disaster. Europe's fate has been sealed by the Americans who control the EU, and that's what we're seeing. Europe is being deindustrialized, and illegal immigration is going to completely reshape the demographics of Europe. We're going to see this in the next 30, 40, 50 years. A very different kind of Europe will emerge. We're already seeing this in the UK right now. Excuse me. So I don't see fascist regimes returning to Europe. It's very unlikely. Populism doesn't really work. Popular voices are being suppressed. And yeah, I don't see a lot of hope for Europe the way things are going right now. Excuse me, I'll just. Okay. Have I listened to GD Baksh's criticism on Agniveer? Nope. Pranav Soni says underestimating native Europeans is not good, sir. Good, bad, whatever. I'm a realist. KB Motography says, will Trump stop the war between Russia and Ukraine and Israel Palestine? I think if Trump comes to power, he's going to stop the US's support for Ukraine. If he stops the arms, ammunition, money, etc., that's been funneled into Ukraine, the war ends very rapidly. Yeah. So it's possible that Trump may put an end to the Russia-Ukraine war, and that could lead to a very rapid Russian victory. What about Israel Palestine? I think Trump will be very strongly pro-Israel, and I don't think Trump will come in the way of Israel doing whatever it's doing. So when it comes to the West Asia region, I think things will continue the way they are continuing. I don't think he will put any limitations or any restrictions on what Israel is doing. When it comes to Russia, Ukraine, I think he will reach out to Putin to whatever extent he can. And I'm sure that he will be aghast. He's aghast at the way the US is the kind of money they are spending on Ukraine. I think he probably will put an end to it, which means Ukraine falls to Russia. Yeah. All right. Advait says, your views on the Indian military going for Striker instead of our own WhAP AFVs, which outperformed the Chinese Type-08 AFVs in the trials in Morocco. I mean, what do I even say about this? We have our vehicles which are designed and built indigenously. They are in contention in Morocco. And the Morocco military is testing the Indian vehicles and the Chinese Type-08 vehicles, AFVs. And the Moroccan military discovered that the Indian vehicles, AFVs, have completely outperformed the Chinese Type-08 AFVs in every department. That's how good the Indian vehicle is. But the Indian military opted to buy the Canadian Striker instead of the indigenous WhAP AFVs. It boggles my mind as to what the military leadership in India is up to. Aren't we supposed to prioritize indigenous manufacturing so that we have no dependencies or as little dependency as possible on foreign nations? Then why do our military leaders insist on purchasing equipment from outside India? I don't understand it. And why is the government of India allowing this to happen? I don't understand it. We have so many manufacturers of defense products in India. I hear there are lots of manufacturers of high quality rifles and so much more, and they are forced to look for customers outside of India because the Indian military is not interested in them. So there's a very significant problem here, and I don't want to say more about this because then I will be getting into the motivations and the reasons for those motivations, and that would be speculation. So I don't know. I think there's a huge problem in here. Why does our military leadership want to keep on procuring arms from abroad and equipment from abroad when we have excellent equipment being manufactured in India? Problem, something very fishy in here. The government needs to look into this. Harsh Sharma says, do you think he will win? I think it's unlikely that he will win. Obviously, Harsh is asking about Donald Trump. The election is in a couple of days. And probably on the 6th of November, our time in India, we probably, if things go per plan, we may have a winner. I think it's going to be unlikely for Trump to win. Why do I say this? Trump is not the favorite of the US establishment. Okay? The US establishment doesn't like Trump. They consider his victory in 2016 to be a huge mistake. And they did course correction in 2020. And Trump has been alleging that the 2020 election was stolen. And you have seen some of that weirdness, okay? So suddenly, the blue votes shooting up, and certain constituencies taking multiple weeks to count the votes. I mean, what a joke is that? There were definite irregularities. Now let me put something up, okay? Something interesting. This is US democracy in action. Check this out. Huge swing. So this is a tweet from Zero Hedge today morning, our time, 5 a.m. our time. Huge swing in Pennsylvania betting odds in the past hour, where Trump has gone from a 56% to 45% lead to suddenly trailing 47-50. I mean, check this out. Does this look natural to you? So I get the feeling that Kamala Harris will win. No matter what happens, they will ensure that Kamala Harris wins, because Kamala is a creature of the US establishment. Trump is a maverick. Trump wants to reform the establishment. He wants to drain the swamp. He wants to give power back to the people. Kamala is establishment. Kamala is a puppet. Kamala doesn't have a brain. So if you are the US establishment, who do you want? You obviously want a person who's going to be completely controlled by you. Trump is a maverick. Trump will bring in Elon Musk. He'll bring in Robert Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr. He'll bring in Tulsi Gabbard, who the Democrats hate because she switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. He'll bring in Vivek Ramaswamy. He'll bring in JD Vance. He'll bring in Ron Paul and Elon Musk, and so on. So that's a nightmare scenario for the US establishment, the unelected US establishment. I think they'll ensure that Kamala wins. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, it's good for India if Trump wins, but doesn't look like it'll happen. I hope I am wrong. I'll be very happy if I'm proven wrong. But I think there's a very small chance that Trump wins. So let me show you something else. For example, take a look at this. For instance, and by the way, so here we have this. This is something that Elon Musk tweeted today, once again, early morning. Legacy media election interference. Okay. The legacy media, 84% of the Kamala Harris coverage is positive, and 89% of the Trump coverage is negative. This is election interference. Very clear. So in the US, let me just restate this: there's no such thing as a democracy in the US. The US is an empire, an, a uniparty autocracy, dictatorship, empire, masquerading as a democracy with two parties. And there's clear election interference that's happening through the legacy media, mass media, and so much more. And there are very strong allegations by Trump himself that the 2020 election was stolen. And it may be possible that even this election, despite Trump being so overwhelmingly more popular than Kamala Harris, it looks like Kamala Harris will win. I hope I'm wrong. It will be good for India if Trump wins, but I think it's less likely. Okay, next the question. We have about half an hour to go. Okay, McLevin says, do you think national pride has gone down? Compared to the time of Modi 1.0 and 2.0, Diwali and Independence Day doesn't feel like it used to. You can see less crackers being burst right now. I'm sure if you pay attention, you can hear some cracker noise on this mic right now because there are crackers being burst around me. This is not a soundproof room. But I have noticed this, that the number of crackers people burst on Diwali is gradually decreasing every year. So I think that's because of the propaganda done by the media in India. Even certain government ministers, chief ministers, have been putting out this propaganda that especially among children, that you need to have a cracker-free Diwali. All that. The media comes out and says that animals, they feel traumatized when you burst crackers. Yeah, they don't get traumatized when you do other things to them. But anyway, I'm not going to all that matter. Has national pride gone down? I don't know about that. We certainly see less crackers being burst on Diwali. Independence Day, look, Independence Day is a secular festival. You're actually commemorating dominion status, not independence. 15th of August 1947 was Dominion Status Day. It was not independence. Okay, India became a dominion of the empire. So it's a fake secular festival. It has nothing to do with Indian history and civilization. It's not a civilizational festival. We Indians feel a connection when you have something civilizational. Independence Day, I have never seen a lot of enthusiasm among people. I mean, every year on Independence Day, if you go to various parts of various Indian cities, you'll have the same thing done every day. Every Independence Day in the morning, every housing society will, the local VIP is gonna do a flag hoisting and some speech, and then they will play some sad songs. "Eh, mere watan ke logo sab ro din bhar." That sort of sad song they'll play. Instead of playing a song of victory, they'll play a song of defeat. That sort of thing. It's very fake. It's very artificial. We don't commemorate victories in India. We don't celebrate victories. We want to remember defeats and all that. 62 defeat and all. So Independence Day has never been such an inspiring thing, historically. I've never seen it that way. I wish it was. It's not been that way. Diwali, it used to be much more celebrated much more enthusiastically in the past. Nowadays, there is increasing deracination among Indians from their culture. So you're not even seeing that anymore. So overall, I think civilizational identity and pride is going down. Modi 1.0, Modi 2.0, well, it's just a passage of time that you're seeing these things happening. So yeah, it's unfortunate, and a lot of it is because of the education system. We just simply don't cover our culture and our history in that, and whatever is covered is very negative. So kids, they simply want to distance themselves from Indian culture and history, and they don't identify with the culture and civilization anymore, or they identify less, and that's why we're seeing this. Ritik Pawar says, "How can I change the world?" Well, look, everybody is different, and everybody can make a dent, like they say, in the universe in their own way. How can you change the world? By, first of all, by being a participant, not merely an observer. How do you participate? By trying to change things, by shaking things up in a good way, hopefully, by contributing something of value to society, right? So, how do you change the world? You do that by changing yourself. You do that by becoming the best version of yourself you possibly can. You do that by reaching the fullest extent of your potential. That's what you do. You do that by raising your standards. Raising your standards is easier said than done. It is very difficult, but you do it slowly, step by step by step. That's how you. So first, you have to transform yourself thoroughly. Utilize every every gram of potential that you have. You raise yourself to the highest possible standards that you can achieve. You do that, you're going to have a transformative effect of some kind on your environment, and that's how you change the world in your own way. Okay, that's what you do. You have to work really hard for that. Okay. Sumit Jain says, is Russia at the peak of its power as a nation since the fall of the USSR? It is. It is. When the USSR fell, Russia, well, what came out of the USSR, of the debris of the USSR, was first of all these independent nations, the Commonwealth of Independent States, it used to be called, which was all the Central Asian republics, the CI, the Stans, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, so on and so forth, all those nations. And you had the Baltic republics, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and so on. So all these came out of the USSR. They became independent. And then you had rump Russia that was left. And Yeltsin, Boris Yeltsin, the drunkard, became the president, and he proceeded to ruin the economy of the nation. So he handed over the life savings of generations of Russians to a bunch of thugs, crooks, oligarchs. See, the USSR was a collectivized society. So all the savings of the people were held collectively as the wealth of the nation. It was all in the custody of the government of Russia, of the USSR. After independence, all that wealth that was saved up was handed over to oligarchs, to what we call oligarchs. And they proceeded to deliberately ruin the economy and squander away the wealth. That is what Yeltsin did to Russia. He destroyed the Russian economy. It was a disaster. And much worse, during his time, the Chechens they declared independence. There was the first Chechen war, which Russia lost under Yeltsin's presidency. And then Putin comes to power, and everybody thinks Putin is going to be another puppet. But Putin goes ahead and wins the second Chechen war by flattening Grozny. And it was brutal, but he won. He made it very clear that he will not tolerate separatism, something we can learn from the Russians to some extent. We don't necessarily have to follow the exact same path, but we can learn a thing or two from them, from the Russians. And then slowly over time, he rebuilt the economy, Vladimir Putin. He restructured the military. He made the military a fighting force again. And today, Russia is despite all the sanctions, the truckloads of sanctions the Americans have imposed on Russia, despite that, the Russian economy is actually growing. It's the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. Definitely outperforming all the European nations. Russia, you won't really say it's a European nation, it's an Eastern nation, but whatever. So Russia is doing incredibly well. Russia has actually come out of this war looking so much better. All, I would say, as an outcome of the policies Putin has been working on and implementing for the past, I don't know, what, 25 plus years. 25 plus years. So I would agree with you, Sumit Jain, that Russia is indeed at the peak of its power as a nation since the fall of the USSR. And the crucial thing going forward is that succession. So Mr. Putin is in his early 70s, I don't know, 72, 73 or whatever years old he is, right? The question is, how long does he stay in power? He is now definitely becoming an elderly person, right? Maybe 10 years. Then he will eventually have to hand over the reins of power to someone else. Now, Russia, let's be very clear, is not a democracy. There is no such thing as a democracy in the world. They're all fake democracies. So most likely he will have to handpick a successor. That is the succession in the regime, in the nation. If you mess up the succession, the nation crumbles, and everything you worked for will be lost. So in any nation, if you look at history, the past 2000 years of history, the most critical phase of time in the history of an empire, of a kingdom, of a nation is when there is succession, a transfer of power from one ruler to another, either through voluntary abdication, through death, or whatever, conquest. If the succession goes wrong, everything the previous leader worked for can be squandered in a matter of months or years. So Russia is indeed at the peak of its power. The most important thing for Russia is for Mr. Putin to pick the right successor, somebody who will take it even further than him. Does he have somebody in mind right now? Only he will know. He will not announce it to anyone, as he should, and that's the right policy. Don't tell anyone. Keep it secret. So if he gets that right, then in 100 years he will be called Putin the Great. Otherwise, it'll be a mess. We don't know. Abhishek says, who's the actual ruler of America? We don't quite know. Whoever is actually in power will not reveal themselves. I don't think it's one single person. Maybe it's a group of people. Look, it's very clear in the past 4 years. It's become eminently clear in the past 4 years that Joe Biden isn't ruling the US. That guy is not even there fully, right? He's not there. So Joe Biden isn't ruling the US. Is Kamala Harris ruling the US? That lady also isn't there. I mean, she can't even answer questions straight. You think she understands what she's doing? So it's neither the president, Joe Biden, nor the vice president, Kamala Harris, who's ruling the country. Then who's ruling the country? Somebody is. Somebody is. So you have a president who's not there. You have a vice president who's incompetent and who can't rule the country. And yet the country is running along. So somebody is ruling the country. So the last 4 years have made it very clear that the US president and vice president are just for show. They're just there to keep the attention of people focused on them, while whoever really rules the country goes ahead with the job of ruling the country. And if you look at the way the economy is structured in the US, the central bank in the US, the Federal Reserve, is a privately owned bank, and no one knows who the real shareholders are, which is incredible. That means that the US is privately owned, essentially. The US economy is privately owned by a bunch of people who no one knows. I think whoever those are the real rulers of America. And that's not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact. Let's look it up. You know, the most famous website in the world is Wikipedia, right? Let's go to Wikipedia. Okay, let's put this on the screen. And let's see what it says about the Federal Reserve. US Federal Reserve. Let's just go to Wikipedia. Let's see what it says. The Federal Reserve is a monetary policy structure composed of several layers. We know that. Federal Reserve purpose. Interesting. But does it tell you who are the shareholders? Who owns? Regulation, history of the Federal Reserve, shareholders, legal status. Yeah, it's kind of trying to obfuscate Federal Reserve shareholders. Let's try and see who are the shareholders. The stock is owned by banks, never by individuals. Who owns the Federal Reserve? It's not owned by anyone. You know, they'll try and hide what really is going on, but the point is you don't know who owns the Federal Reserve. So very, 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 what would Gen Z say? Sus. It's very sus. Right. Nirakar one says, what next for India-Canada issues? I tweeted this a while ago that the lowest point of the India Canada relationship hasn't happened yet. And I stand by what I said. Things are going from bad to worse. The Canadians have recently disclosed that they have placed various Indian diplomats under surveillance, which is in complete contravention of the Vienna Accord or whatever it is. And yeah, things are really bad. Uh, Placing diplomats who have diplomatic immunity under surveillance is a violation of international law, and they have done that, and they have been leaking allegations to the Washington Post despite having no evidence whatsoever that substantiates the allegations they are making. So I think the Indian government has done the right thing by completely nuking the relationship with Canada. We've thrown the relationship with Canada under the bus. We said we don't care about you. You don't matter to us. We are perfectly okay with having no diplomatic relations with you. And by doing that, we are sending a message to the owner of Canada, the US. So I don't see this relationship being repaired anytime soon. The Canadian government has been harboring terrorists on their soil, Canadian terrorists who have Canadian citizenship, and the Americans are also harboring American terrorists on the soil. So it's a very bad phase, bad point in time in the India-Canada relationship, and the entire fault for the situation lies in the hands of Canada. They are at fault. We haven't done this. They did this. Right. Mhm. Um, okay, Ayush asks this question. I watched your video on the Armenia Azerbaijan war, in which the Russian made robots were used. Please tell more. Okay, I'm assuming the what you are referring to is the loitering munitions. So the Russia, okay, the Armenia Azerbaijan war had two phases. I think 2020, and then a couple of years later, it again flared up. And what you saw for the first time in this war was a very different kind of warfare. You had the use of loitering munitions and suicide drones. I think the striker drones that have these wings shaped like dragonflies' wings that fly around, loiter around high above, no one notices them, and then they suddenly come and dive and hit the most vulnerable part of tanks, which is the turret, the topmost portion of a tank. This drone comes in and this takes it out, and boom, you're gone. So tanks became very vulnerable because of this, and that was the first time you saw this sort of tactic being used. And now it's used everywhere in warfare. That's the classic 21st century warfare now that's become very common, especially in the context of the Russia Ukraine conflict, right? So this was seen for the first time on the battlefield during the Armenia Azerbaijan war, the first phase of the war, which was, I mean, in the 21st century. It all begins in the 20th century during the early 90s, but we're talking about the 21st century phase of this war, the Nagorno Karabakh or Artsakh conflict. So you had Russian striker and other munitions loitering around, and then come down, and they take out the top of the tank, the turret, and that's the most vulnerable part of a tank, with the least amount of armor. And yeah, that was like a game changer. And then the Russians and others, they came up with various mechanisms to try and offset this, putting up a whole cage of stuff, or cage kind of thing, a grid made of wires and metal on top of the turret of a tank that will ensure that the drone will explode a few feet above the actual surface of the turret, which will uh, you know spare the tank and ensure that much of the explosive power is wasted, that sort of thing. So there, we are still seeing the evolution of battle tactics right now, and all of this was first seen during the Armenia Azerbaijan conflict, 2020 roughly. So I think what I spoke about was this: the robots which we're talking about is those loitering munitions, these remote controlled drones, and that's probably it. And these drones, they also have a live video feed, so you can see it's coming in, and you can see that the target it's coming towards you because you're going towards the target. And the end stage, just before detonation, you can actually sadly see the faces of the soldiers who suddenly realize something's coming towards them. Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal, and warfare is so sad, so brutal. But That's how it has always been. Yeah. Okay. Abhishek Dayal says, is military rule the only option left for a strong Bharat? Well, look, I am okay with any sort of rule that ensures the long-term security, prosperity, and territorial integrity and cultural and civilizational continuity of the country. It doesn't matter what kind of rule it is. Historically, what kind of rule have we had in a strong Bharat? Historically, the Mauryan Empire. What was it? I think it was military rule, wasn't it? Chandragupta Maurya was a warrior, wasn't he? His grandson Ashok, what was he? He was a conqueror, wasn't he? Um, then we had a strong Bharat during the Pushyamitra Shunga era. Pushyamitra was what? Senapati, who assassinated his emperor because his emperor was leading to the ruination of the country. So he took out the emperor and he becomes the emperor of India, Pushyamitra Shunga. And he never called himself emperor. Until his last day, Pushyamitra called himself Senapati. But so he was Senapati, but he kind of restored some stability to the Indian subcontinent. Then you have the Kushan era. Kanishka was one of our greatest emperors of all time. Kanishka the Great. What was that? That was military rule. That was military rule. He reconquered so much territory. He his empire touched the shores of the Caspian Sea and the Aral Sea in the west. It encompassed much of the present day subcontinent, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all of that. And he also retook the Tarim River basin, Xinjiang, Tibet from the Chinese. So that was military rule. It was great for India. Gupta rule, what was it? Military rule. Then you had Chola rule. What was Chola rule? Chola rule, military rule. So whenever India has done great historically, it's always been imperial system, an emperor, not a prime minister. Pradhan Amatya means prime minister. Do you know that? So we've always had autocracy, emperors, and military rule. But do we have high quality military leaders today? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. What is the quality of our military leadership today? It's very bureaucratic, isn't it? Extremely bureaucratic. You think such a structure is capable of ruling India the way our ancient emperors used to do it so successfully? Big question. It's not enough to have military rule. You need to have high quality military leadership. High quality. Highest quality. Brilliant strategically, tactically. And a very crystal clear understanding of the national and civilizational interest. Do you think our armed forces have any understanding of the civilizational interest? Our armed forces are fully secular. Complete respect to our brave armed forces members who every single day put their lives on the line to defend an ungrateful nation. No question about the fact that they deserve complete respect. I'm talking about the military leadership up there. And I'm talking about the culture in the Indian military. It's very secular. It's not rooted in India's civilization. Very secular. Problems there. Okay. Okay. Witty World says, is Darwin's theory true? Are we really evolved from apes? What does our Itihasam say? Please enlighten. Our Itihas was written by Homo sapiens, our ancestors who lived several thousand years before, right? Now, when it comes to evolution, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years. The best evidence that we have tells us that there was a migration of Homo sapiens out of Africa roughly 70 or so thousand years ago. That's the best evidence that we have. Now, if new evidence emerges, we will modify our understanding of our history. But from the best evidence that we have, there was an evolution of humans, Homo sapiens, out of Africa roughly 70,000 years ago. The first settlement of the out of Africa migration, permanent long-term settlement, was in the Indian subcontinent. And from the subcontinent, humans spread all across the world. All across the world. Before Homo sapiens, we had Homo neanderthalis, Homo florensis, Homo denisovanis, etc., and other archaic humans who lived in Eurasia, who were older migrations of humans out of Africa. But our ancestors were mostly Homo sapiens, with maybe we most non-African humans have about 4% Neanderthal ancestry. You go back about 400,000 years ago, we find the oldest evidence of Homo sapiens, archaic Homo sapiens. 400,000 years ago. The fossils were discovered in a region called Jebel Irhoud in, I think, Morocco or Algeria, North Africa. Before that, we find more ancient humans who are more ape-like. You had Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo whatever else, and what Ardipithecus, and so on. So you can see in the fossil record, if you as you go back in time, you see more and more archaic ancestors of humans, more ape-like, right? So the evidence that we have, see, science is all based on evidence. You have theories and you have evidence, and the theory must match the evidence, or evidence must match the theory. If you have a theory but the evidence says something different, then your theory is false. It's discarded. That's how science works. It's all entirely logical. It's all based on the concept of pratyaksha praman, evidence, hard evidence, empirical evidence. So from whatever we see when it comes to the evolution of humans, or the evolution of our closest cousins, the chimpanzees, etc., the Darwinian paradigm does work. It is indeed true, right? Um, and it's not like Darwin was some prophet who came up with some new theory. No, he observed things, and on the basis of that, he came up with a theory which has been then more or less proven to be correct. Evolution. So our itihas speaks about human history of the past few thousand years, of the history of our ancestors in the subcontinent, maybe in the last 10,000 or so years. I don't think our itihas speaks about a time period 300,000 years before today. No. Our itihas speaks about the oldest stories in our itihas are what the first battle that we know of, the first geopolitical military campaign, the Battle of the Ten Kings, and some events somewhat before that. That may be, I don't know, the past 10,000 years, 12,000 years, because it doesn't speak about ice sheets covering the earth, which means it's a time period that came after the last ice age. The last ice age ended about 11,000 years before today. So we're talking about a period of history in the past 10,000 years. That's what our Itihas talks about. And 10,000 years is too small a period of time to see any actual visible evolution. So that's where we are. So from all the evidence, hard evidence that we have, the Darwinian paradigm is indeed correct. Evolution does happen. We've seen that. We've seen that in the fossil record and fossil evidence. And some species change a lot. Some species don't change too much. Crocodilians haven't changed a lot in the past 500 million years. Crocodiles used to eat dinosaurs. Today they eat whatever's available today here. uh, and so on. We know how whales have evolved. Whales and cetaceans and dolphins, they evolved out of dog-like animals. So whales, dolphins, closely related to each other. They're also closely related to various kinds of seals. And you can see that seals bark like dogs. Seals are like aquatic doggies. So whales, seals, dogs are all closely related evolutionary, from an evolutionary perspective. And dogs have evolved out of wolves. They are the same species or subspecies. They are closely related to foxes and jackals, and to bears. You look at a bear's face, it's very dog-like. So all of this is, you can see, the evolutionary branches of various families. So it's true, no doubt about it. I don't think our itihas has delved into evolution. Of course, if you look at the various avatars of Vishnu, it does look like evolution, doesn't it? Matsya, and then whatever else, right? The Vaman, the boar avatar, then the Vaman avatar, and all that sort of thing. It is kind of intriguing. It is kind of intriguing for sure. Yeah. Okay. What else? Okay, Grim Zobad says, if Trump loses, will we see a second American civil war because Trump supporters won't back down this time? Look, I don't know about that. I hope there is no violence. We certainly do not support any form of violence. I would urge all Americans to conduct whatever happens peacefully. Uh, I think it is quite likely that Trump will lose despite him being the more popular candidate, which obviously means that there's something uh, unusual that will happen. But such is life. You don't always get what you want in life. I hope there is no violence. There has been talk of civil war in the US media and whatever else. There is, I think, a non-trivial, non-zero probability that some untoward incidents may happen, depending on which way the result goes. But I would say that I would urge the American public not to, you know, resort to violence. I hope that doesn't happen. But there seems to be a possibility of that, however small or large it may be. I don't know about that. Yeah, but I hope it doesn't happen. Um, Akshay Dillon says, how can India move ahead to greater heights with so many geopolitical challenges? There's only one solution. There's only one solution: economic growth. You want to get stronger militarily, you need more money. For that, you need economic growth. The solution to everything is sustained economic growth for 20, 30, 40 years. There is no other solution whatsoever. But it doesn't mean that you only focus on economic growth and forget everything else. You also have to do other things like reforming the education system, focusing on culture, etc. The Modi government has done nothing whatsoever to reform the education system. The new education policy is a joke. It does nothing. It does nothing to address the real core issues. So the solution to geopolitical challenges is economic growth. But while you are growing your economy, if you allow 100 million Bangladeshis to come and squat on your territory and another 2 million cookies to come on your territory, then eventually you're going to hand over this gigantic economy to outsiders. And you're allowing industrial scale demographic re-engineering in the country, in Punjab and wherever else. Then what's the point of economic growth? So I would urge the Modi government to take these issues seriously. You really have to do something to reform the education system. Enough of this focus on humanities and all that garbage. The focus should be on STEM, science, technology. That's what the focus should be on. And you need to teach your own culture to your kids in their native languages. Otherwise, you will end up with people like me who are more comfortable in a foreign language than in their own native languages. And when somebody is more comfortable in a foreign language, those people are mentally colonized. And most of them, unlike me, will suffer from a tremendous inferiority complex. So they'll try their best to move abroad and give up on their country. So the government needs to reform the system, reform the bureaucracy, reform the other institutions. Let's just put it at that. Reform the education system, instill a sense of civilizational pride, which is completely lacking, undo some of the colonial mental colonization. Nothing is being done in that direction by the Modi government, which is so disappointing. Only working on the economy and infrastructure is not enough. Learn from our good friends, the Chinese. There is so much to admire in China. But we seem to be on the path to vassalage of the West. There are so many, should I say this? There are so many elements in the Indian government who seem to be deeply beholden to the West. They want Western visas, their family members have foreign citizenships, and so on. That is very concerning. If Vishnugupta Chanakya were to be brought back today and asked what are the top problems in India today, he will say, first of all, anybody who has relatives who have foreign citizenships should be thrown out of government and investigated. Anybody who's married to a person of foreign origin should be investigated and should not be in any position of power. Right? So all these things need to be looked at very seriously. So once we deal with these problems, we can move on to greater heights. We need economic growth, very important to deal with geopolitical challenges. We need to become the second or first largest economy in the world, which we historically always were. But we also have to structurally reform our ratios. Where is the war on corruption? The one of the biggest problems India faces today is corruption. Corruption is the root of most problems in India. Where's the war on corruption? How many years has it been since Mr. Modi has been in power? Where is the war on corruption? Are we even beginning to see something? I'm not saying there's corruption at the top. There's not, most likely, at the topmost level of the government. But you have to address the grassroots corruption, which is ruining the lives of Indians. And you have to reform the institutions and so much more. So there are so many challenges. Probably we need better leaders going forward. Sid says, do you think Mr. Modi will step down 27-28 and hand over to Yogi? How do you see India under Mr. Yogi and the future of Pakistan, Bangladesh? Only Mr. Modi knows what he will do. I remember I was hoping that in 2009 there were elections in India. I was hoping that Mr. Modi will be the prime ministerial candidate then, because he was younger. He had already proven his worth as the chief minister of Gujarat. It was the right time for him to become the prime ministerial candidate for the BJP. But what happened? There was internal resistance towards Mr. Modi in the BJP. And Mr. Advani, who was in his 80s or something, was the prime minister candidate in 2009. And the BJP suffered a resounding defeat. Because who wants to have an 88-year-old or whatever year-old prime minister? Nobody wants that. Then in 2014 again, there was significant resistance against Mr. Modi. But eventually Mr. Modi was made the prime minister candidate of the BJP and he won 2014. So I hope that going forward, whenever the time comes, if let's say in 2027 or whenever, if Yogi ji is the best possible candidate, there should not be that sort of resistance within the BJP towards him. And I think it is Mr. Modi's job to ensure that the way is clear for whoever is the best candidate at that time. I think if you look at the various leaders in the BJP right now, I think Yogi ji could be the one we would see as the next possible leader, as the next potential prime ministerial candidate in 29 is the next election, whenever it is. So if that is the case, and in 29 comes around and he is the best possible candidate, then I hope that Mr. Modi ensures that there is no resistance internally in the BJP towards Mr. Yogi. That's succession is critical. Okay, and if you get succession wrong, you whatever you work towards is completely can be completely undone. So that's how I see it. I don't know how it will be under Mr. Yogi and all that. It's too far ahead to see. But I think Mr. Yogi has already proven a lot in the way he has been administering Uttar Pradesh. Probably he will need to win UP one more time, which is extremely challenging. But if he can do that, then I think the way should be clear for him. And so it's up to Mr. Modi to decide. He says that in the BJP, leader should step down at 75. In case he wants to follow his own rule, then by that time, Mr. Yogi should be in prime position if he wins UP in the next election. Let's see how it goes. I don't know about the future. I'm not a fortune teller, so I am not in the business of making predictions. Okay, Muhammad Ismail says, is missionary activity primarily concentrated in Nagaland? Do you think Christian missionaries are influencing people to shift their allegiance towards the West and in the US? I've seen Nagas wanting independence. You ask good questions. Missionary activity is currently not in Nagaland. Nagaland has been almost completely converted to Christianity, right? Their native culture has been wiped out. The same thing has happened in Mizoram, in Meghalaya, and various other parts of the far east of India, northeast of India. I think the major Christian missionary activity is happening in Manipur right now. They're trying to target the Meiteis, who are the holdouts, who thus far have resisted conversion. In the past, decade or so, I think 1.5 or 2 lakh Meiteis have finally converted to Christianity. So, yeah, that's what we are saying. I think it's happening more in Manipur right now. They're going after the Meiteis. Apart from the northeast, you are seeing massive industrial scale missionary activity in Punjab and in various tribal regions of India, etc. Wherever you have poverty, they will go and exploit that. That's what they do, right? And you are right. The Japanese wrote about this, the Chinese wrote about this, that whenever their people are induced to convert to the foreign religion, those people develop extraterritorial loyalties. So that I think we see in India also. And you see in the northeast, in the far east of India, the most powerful force, political force there is the church, and they are the ones who organize people together. Generally, tribals don't have a very strong leadership structure, right? Tribal people, the church becomes the leadership structure and leadership provider, and then they have been essentially the church authorities have been instigating these separatist and other tendencies, and that's well known. It's been well known for a very long time. So yeah, it is a very major national security threat. I personally have nothing against any religion. If a person, for entirely personal reasons, wants to convert to this religion, that religion, or whatever, I think they should have the choice to do that. It's an entirely personal matter, your religion or your spiritual inclination. If you want to try this, you want to try that. If you want to become Christian today, Muslim tomorrow, Jewish next day, then Buddhist, then Hindu, whatever you want to do, it's entirely your choice. I have nothing against that. But when you have industrial scale organized religious conversion activity on a massive scale, that is an assault against the civilizational and cultural fabric of a nation, and that is what I'm opposed to. Apart from that, if you want to, I don't care who practices what religion. It's entirely a personal matter. So that's how I see things, and that's what we are. So I'm glad you asked this question. Very, very pertinent question. We'll take one last question from McLevin. Do I think the 9 unknown men are real? Are real? Well, I no comments. I will look. Don't tell anybody, but it's not true. Okay. um, yeah. We're not supposed to talk about it. Okay, I guess that's where we are. Okay, so I'm gonna end this live stream over here. It's been 2 hours and 13 plus minutes. So thank you so much for all the questions. Apologies to those of you whose questions I could not take. Obviously, there are thousands of questions here, and I'll keep doing this. Next week we will have one more live stream, at least one more, and we'll take more questions. And I'm sure by that time we'll have the election results, hopefully of the US, and certain scenarios will have played out by that time. So I'll see you in roughly a week's time. Until then, take care. Take care. Thank you very much for your questions. Keep asking questions and keep raising your standards. I'll see you very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.